Welcome back. Now, state capture is largely blamed for South Africa's current state of affairs. In his 2024 State of the Nation address, President Cyril Ramaphosa highlights this, adding that the end of the 2007-2008 global financial crisis also ended South Africa's decade of strong growth and job creation. But the president says that reforms are in place to tackle joblessness, load shedding, as well as the logistics and water crises. And a promise of free healthcare for all South Africans, NHI, will be implemented incrementally. Martin Kingston, who's chair of Business for South Africa, joins us with his assessment of the president's address. Martin, thank you for your time and a good afternoon.
Afternoon to you, Nolutanda, and to your viewers.
Well, Martin, I think overall, I'm keen just to get your sentiments on yesterday's address and how business characterized that speech. I think it's the longest one that we've had in many years.
Yeah, so it was a very long speech. I was actually in the House when it was delivered. And I think that it was, frankly, what we would have expected in the run-up to an election. It was the preamble, as far as I'm concerned, to a clear attempt by the ANC to position themselves in terms of what they've delivered to date and in terms of what they seek to do going forwards. You've touched on some of those issues. So I don't expect it to be completely balanced, certainly not from a business perspective. But in terms of a manifesto speech or a preamble to a manifesto speech, as I said, it's what we would characterize as sort of as balanced as it could be under the circumstances. I don't think it's fair to attribute either exogenous factors such as the global financial crisis or indeed state capture to all of our woes. They certainly made a contribution. The reality is, and the president himself has admitted this in other fora, is that in many respects we are the architect of our own misfortunes. In particular, the lack of capacity of the state. He's been very blunt about acknowledging that in the past, as well as an inability to implement critical decisions, or indeed in some cases take critical decisions with respect to structural reform, which is what we need to be able to ensure that we can actually power forward the economy from a very lackluster 1% or so as we see today in terms of GDP. And in that regard, we, as you and your viewers will know, have actually put very significant resources behind our partnership with business, both in the context initially of the pandemic and the vaccination rollout, and now currently with respect to a focus on three particular areas: energy, transport and logistics, and crime and corruption, all of which were mentioned and where he acknowledged the role of business. And we're starting to see that needle move, not as quickly as we would like, I have to say, not as broadly as is necessary, but there's absolutely clear momentum. And if we harness the support of the private sector, which is absolutely critical to address these issues, I think we will start to make progress. Second point I'd like to make is that I think that he also acknowledged the need for fiscal prudence, recognizing our constraints. That's absolutely essential given the fact that we're going to be having the Minister of Finance's budget in 2 weeks' time. And I hope that there were no commitments that were made, with the single exception of NHI, I'm sure you'll come back to that in due course, that gave us cause for concern as being new issues. Of course, he referred to the possibility of broader support. We all know that the basic income grant is an issue that's under consideration, and we've expressed our view very clearly as to our inability to be able to afford issues that are, or costs that are beyond our current capacity, which is extremely constrained and limited if we look at the current deficit.
Martin, I actually want to speak about the issue of NHI because the president said he's looking for the pen or something along those lines, and I wasn't sure what to make of that. I mean, literally, we know the president does have a pen at his disposal, but he obviously wants to dot some I's and cross some T's. Is this the kind of thing that business welcomes at this point, the prospects of him carefully considering whether he should sign this bill or not?
Now, we have petitioned the president saying that we don't believe that the bill is implementable. We actually don't think it's viable or financeable, and we certainly don't think it's practically implementable, as I said. We believe that he should refer it back to the parliamentary process. The parliamentary process didn't go through due process, the necessary rigor, either in the National Assembly or in the National Council of Provinces. There were literally thousands of inputs from stakeholders, not just from business. Not one of them was taken into consideration, including, I have to say, from the Department of Health itself. We think that it is both procedurally and actually structurally and legally flawed, and we've said as much to the president in our petition. Interestingly, the president's spokesperson, less than 24 hours before the State of the Nation address, actually said that there's a process within the presidency where the legal advisors to the president need to apply their mind, and that's a process that is underway. So I actually think that there's a very small risk of the president tomorrow reaching for his pen. I think that was said. It wasn't actually in his script. If you read his written script, it was something that he said in the moment, and no doubt garnered, and we saw that it garnered significant support from within the House, and indeed I have no doubt from within the support base of the ANC and those that he's seeking to appeal to. The reality of the situation is that even if it were implemented, litigation would flow. It wouldn't, even if he signed it, it wouldn't be passed into law immediately, or even if it was, as I said, it would be stopped by litigation. The second point is that even under their current proposition, it's a very long and extensive rollout over phases. So the reality is that although we as business fully support the need for universal healthcare, and we saw that very starkly, we see it every day. We saw it starkly during the pandemic, and we see it on an ongoing basis. And nevertheless, it's not going to result in tomorrow there being universal healthcare accessible to everybody, which is, of course, the promise of NHI. But we think that it does undermine confidence, and confidence, as we know, is a very fragile commodity, particularly in the current circumstances. We also know, Nolutando, that it's going to become very noisy in the next few months in the lead up to the elections, and we're going to have to either ignore the noise or sort of work our way through the noise, if I can put it that way, with our eye on the main prize, which is, as I said, to be prudent and conservative in our approach, to implement structural reform, to focus on a limited number of interventions, as we're doing, to harness the resources that are available in the country, again, as business is doing in the three areas that I mentioned. But I have no doubt that what will be said by a number of political parties will potentially spook the markets in the short term.
I must ask you, Martin, the issue of, crime, the National Prosecuting Authority. I know there's an amendment, a bill there that needs to be processed. And I know business is keen on, having an outcome there that will see the private sector partner with government with issues there. Did we hear anything about that satisfies a business, or is it something else that hangs in the balance?
Well, so as you say, the bill that is before Parliament needs to be fast-tracked. We've been heavily involved in commenting on that, and the president himself mentioned it in his State of the Nation address. That's absolutely essential to make sure that we've got the sort of wherewithal within the NPA to be able to prosecute crimes, both in the public and indeed in the private sector, as we all know, and to hold people to account. There's no doubt that corruption and criminality is both widespread and, I would have to say, in some respects, endemic and systemic, and it needs to be addressed. It's a huge drain on the economy on the one hand, and a threat to people individually and institutionally to the country more broadly. So it needs to be dealt with. We are in one of the work streams partnering with the government under the auspices of the Joint Initiative on Crime and Corruption. That's an established structure overseen by government. We're very mindful, Nolutando, of the fact that we need to be seen to be at arm's length from government. We can't interfere in any shape, size or form, but to the extent that we can provide skills, experience, capability, which withstands scrutiny and doesn't compromise anybody, that's what we will continue to do. And indeed, once again, that was referred to more broadly by the president.
Martin, we don't have much time left, but I must ask you overall, there are pockets of our society that believe that Israel was just a talk shop. And of course, we know in South Africa, we do have a weakness when it comes to implementing policies, desires, all of it really. And I'm just wondering from your perspective here, does the State of the Nation address, still hold in terms of what is said and then the integrity that follows the actions afterwards?
Well, what we're going to do, exactly as you've indicated, is focus on the actions that need to be taken. In fact, there's a precursor to actions, which is taking critical decisions. We're playing a significant role in forcing those decisions in a collaborative manner, and then making sure that we've got the resources available to assist in the implementation of those decisions. As I said, it's taking longer than we would like, but there's discernible progress in all of those three areas, and I hope that will continue.
Fantastic. Always a pleasure having you with us, Martin. Thank you so much for your time today. That was Chairperson of Business for South Africa, Martin Kingston.